Yeah, hi everyone, and welcome to this discussion between Phil Pengelly and myself, and Edward Richardson, who've joined us. And this chat with you today is going to be around preparing for winter. Now it's just around the corner, and so we're going to talk through a range of subjects, including looking at feeding of livestock, of looking ahead to things to prepare for spring, and also the various sort of programs and other options that are available, both within the Penrith Landscape Partnership and also outside. So we're going to treat this as a conversation between us, and yeah, Phil and Edward are going to kindly share their thoughts and views as we go through the topics. If there's something we don't cover in this conversation, or if you have any particular questions, then we'll have our contact details at the end of the presentation. We're welcome to get in touch with either of us and and ask the questions directly, or it might be something we might cover in a later conversation. So to kick us off, is the 24th of November. We are definitely heading in towards winter, and we've got some stock to feed and hopefully get through winter into a really great position, ready for the spring. So if we start with some dry cows, so whether this is dry suckler cows or possibly dry dairy cows, then yeah, Phil or Edward, do you want to kick us off with your thoughts on those? How are these cows looking? How have the dry cows or spring calving cows fared this season, and what condition are they like at the moment?
I mean, it's been a difficult year because we, as consultants, haven't been able to get out as much as we would like to be. But I would think it's been although it has been wet, the ground is reasonably well, and cattle have done reasonably well outside, so they should be coming in good order. I do think that, in some cases the grass is a bit wet, and can we supplement that grass with something like some hay, or if we've got some good silage, do we need to just add in some hay or some straw into that ration, keep them looking well? We want to keep them in good condition coming up to, they'll be calving in a couple of months' time. It's important to keep them in good condition and not trying, that they end up milking off their backs. That's what I would say to start off with.
Yeah. I agree with observations. I think all spring calving stock depending on stocking rate on the farm, had a challenging May and early June with that dry period. And we've seen cattle or cows, I think I've seen suckler cows in particular really compensating after that dry period and putting a lot of condition on in the last 2 or 3 months. I feel that milk yield probably was penalised or compromised in that mid-spring period or late spring period, and that's perhaps when a lot of cows were reaching their peak lactation. So yeah, the dairy guys perhaps had a bit more ability to compromise or compensate for that with supplementary feed brought in, and some of the beef farms, depending on stocking rate, I think we've seen a reduction in calf weaning weights. So cows have weaned calves, the cows are in really good condition, but weaning weights are either just below average, despite it being a good growing season.
Yeah, one thing I would say, probably I have noticed as well, is that not all farms have got good access to grass, and it has been on some of the farms I've seen where the grass quality is poor, and we have really got to make an effort to get those some good lays in position and those grasses in good condition, so that if we are going it's going to be used as their main source of food for going for the winter and for the summer. These lays, permanent pastures, have got to be in good condition. They can't be that sole source of grazing when some of them look in pretty poor condition. So we do need to make some effort to bring them into good order, even if not for this winter, for certainly next spring onwards from there.
Yeah.
Is it fair to sorry, go on.
No, I was going to ask you, Phil, in terms of doing a number of soil samples which are available and funded through Penrith Landscape Partnership. What are you seeing sort of pH wise across the board?
Yeah, on the whole, pretty good. Sort of, 5.9 upwards. I suppose the further you go towards the north of the peninsula, they tend to drop a little bit along the, out of Zenner and over towards St Ives. Tend to be higher in the south of the peninsula, but that's a lot to do with soil type, I think.
Yeah.
What I was going to pick up with at one point is the importance of body condition scoring.
Yep.
And you know, I think to encourage everybody to body condition score regularly, and to try and get in the habit of doing it at least on a quarterly basis, to help with the, you know, sort of the management of the cows particularly through the winter. Looking at sort of getting condition scores. Would you agree about 3 to go into the winter?
Would
Yeah.
normally, would expect cows to be between 4 and minimum of 3 in the winter. A 4 has maybe a condition score to lose, and a 3 needs to be held and maintained. And I guess the issue we've got, or challenge sometimes on some farms, is when all the dry cows are run as one group. Then it's having that presence of mind to be out and actively body condition scoring that group, probably in December or just after Christmas, just before the new year, to check that all those cows are receiving sufficient feed, because our dry cows were generally feeding to maintenance, and it means that some cows in the group are probably getting more than they need and others are getting less than they need. So having that flexibility and willingness to go and body condition score that line of cows, and to remove any cow that's fallen backwards in body condition score and feed preferentially.
And do you think it's a fair comment to say that dairy farmers are body condition score more than the beef industry? Would you say that was a fair comment?
Yeah, I think when you see your return every day in the tank, then the willingness, or you become aware of the financial impact of some of those management decisions. Some of it's maybe due to flexibility for your dairy farm, for your average slightly larger herd size, and so the willingness or ability to run a fat group of cows and a thin group of cows. Whereas if you're limited on cow number, the hassle of splitting those cows up requires a bit more of a challenge.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment. But I mean, from my point of view, I would, you know, I think there's lots of resources out there to help people with the body condition scoring. I don't want to linger on it, but you know, there's lots of good resources, and there's lots of good videos on AHDB and that type of thing that can sort of help you out. And there's no limit to how many times you can look at some of these videos and sort of get your eye in. So I think, you know, there's some good, helpful information there.
I think what we're probably not good enough at doing is quantifying the benefits. So a cow that calves at a 2 rather than a 3, how much lighter her calf is likely to be at weaning, and then putting a value on that. So, and there is a value to be had there, and they say that the dairy guy would see that value, and also the impact we also may have is on fertility and conception rates. And that's often also a hidden cost on farm, is the replacement rate. If we've got beef farms with a replacement rate over 10, then potentially it's not 10%, then potentially it's an opportunity, and that's a reasonably high cost to be carrying in that business. So
there's an issue of, you know, if you are challenging that cow and she's not coming in a particularly good order, then you're going to be looking at an issue. She's not going to peak yield. You're going to be challenged trying to get her in calf. If you're trying to get, you know, you're serving her at sort of 45 plus days, then you know you want to try and get her in calf quick enough. And if that isn't happening, then you're starting to lose overall yield for that. Although individually you might look at her, she's not effective, but actually we're starting to lose days off the end, and we're starting to, and if she doesn't peak, then effectively, you know, that lactation curve is going to be that much shorter as well. So
I was trying to think back to what we did last year. If you remember that meeting we had down at St. Murray, and we were talking particularly about the size of cow and the sort of extra maintenance required, and you were talking about you know, sort of, I suppose, the optimum size or optimum weight of particularly suckler cows, I think, at the time. I don't know if you'd got any more to say along that sort of line, James?
No, I think the optimum size for suckler cow will continue to be debated. The UK, I think we're aware, has probably got some of the heaviest cows in the world in terms of its average suckler cow size, and a lot of that, I guess, is driven by the quality of its grassland that a lot of suckler cows run on compared to other countries, which is continuing to increase the mature cow size, and then, you know, a little bit of mindset and breed decisions, which drove up carcass weights whilst they're being paid. If the farmer embraces the decision that, you know, their income's linked to the grass they can grow and utilise, then they're looking for an efficient animal. So
Yeah.
maybe mature cow size should be secondary to ability for that cow to wean a high percentage of her mature weight at weaning. And same with the dairy cow, kilos of milk solids per kilo of live weight is a really nice KPI to work to. And especially when it's challenging for people, isn't it? If they're trying to grow a herd in size, then it's hard to be selective or truly selective in terms of what replacements you bring in, maybe what cows you want to get rid of. So if you can do it rather than just on that weight, but do it on the efficiency, then that's probably a better direction to head in.
Okay, that's fair enough. Thank you.
Okay, so we've got dry cows, and we're assuming there's some sort of maintenance feed, whether that's outside on maybe deferred grass and bales. I see there's a limited number of forage crops in the area, and those there are looking pretty well. We should change now to perhaps either the weaned calf, or this could be the bulling heifer. So we've now got an animal that's not being challenged to maintain weight over the winter, but to maintain itself and to grow. And so what's considerations then, Edward, if we're talking about sort of growing or finishing cattle this winter?
I think first of all that group that you've got is, they're within that group. They're not all going to be the same weight. There will be quite a variance at the start of it. I think you want to be just sort of doing that kilo a day, something like that. And I think the importance of them is, if you are seeing animals within that group that are not performing as well, are you able to split them out and bring them all on so that you are getting a good weight across them all? If you are looking to try and calve down at 2 years, then you want to enable that animal to achieve that right weight at bulling and right weight at calving. I think it's always important, particularly as you go along and you get to that point when you're turning them out. You don't want to just chuck them outside and then they dip because they're not used to eating grass. They miss that sort of surge of grass production. There needs to be a transition period between that calf growing, coming up to turnout, and then going to turnout. It isn't just simply I open the door and off it goes. There has to be some level of transition there. You would do it as a dry cow coming into a dairy herd. You wouldn't expect it to suddenly calve into the milk herd and off it goes, and the same needs to apply to animals that you keep in over the winter and then turn out. There's a little bit of a transition there that they're doing okay. I think something that Penwith has access to is access to a aerator. You've got animals at the moment, it's fine, it's probably too wet to travel with that machine at the moment, but come spring, then I think we've got access to an aerator. It does enable you, there's sort of research so far that it extends your grazing season, so it enables you to turn out earlier, enables you to graze a bit later at the other end because water isn't standing on the surface. You've improved the aeration of the soil, so grass tends to get away a bit better. So if you can use that access to that machine, speak to Phil, he can sort out the arrangement for that. So that's I think my first thoughts at the moment. I think the other thing about that calf, particularly that calf that's on the bucket, I know that's going a bit before what you say, but from the old days from when I used to rear calves, it would be 6 weeks, twice a day bucket feed, and you want to make sure that that calf is growing from the day it comes out. It's growing all the way. You've doubled its weight at weaning. You've got an animal which is going forward. It isn't an animal which has been compromised prior to that date. It's been looked after well, and is an animal ultimately that when it gets into the dairy herd or suckler herd, it will be with you for some time. And certainly research would show you today is that calf which is compromised early on will be the animal which doesn't last in the dairy herd. And then you're then looking for replacements all the time. And I go to a number of dairy herds where they are constantly looking for replacements because they never can produce enough. And the problem, if you looked into it, the real problem is that calf rearing, that it's never quite done, and the calf was compromised early on in life.
Yeah, I would second I would second that, Edward, and the importance of good colostrum and colostrum testing and making sure that calf gets the colostrum it needs in the first days of life. I think that's really important.
And obviously, of course, what we know about colostrum is that the colostrum quality is driven by body condition score of the mother.
Yeah.
And so hence why that body condition scoring is so fundamental, because it's driving the whole system. And the great thing with farming in some ways is that it's a bit of a closed loop, isn't it? And that 12-month cycle will always repeat, which is good when you have that 12-month cycle right. It's not good when it's not quite right, or a part of that process isn't working very well. So yeah, body condition score, good quality colostrum, counts off to a good start. As Ed was saying, I think what flows through from all of this is just being on top of things in terms of, if you can weigh, then weighing, knowing what the targets are. And so we say for a replacement animal, there should be 30% of mature weight at 6 months, 60% at mating, assuming we're going to mate at 14 to 15 months to calve down at 2 years, and then 90% of mature weight at point of calving, or 22 months of age. So the nice easy targets, and it's easy to see if you're on track. But the consequence of not being on track, as you say, is a higher replacement rate, is more cost for the farm system, and it's equally animals who don't perform so well in the herd.
Yeah, I think for those spring calving herds, if your animals aren't at 2 years when they calve, then they're not available to bull, and then suddenly the calving pattern starts to drift, or if you're a milking herd, then suddenly those animals are not available for you to be those replacements, because they fit somewhere outside that tight calving pattern. So I think there's a lot of lessons that the beef industry, spring calving suckler herds, can learn from those spring calving dairy herds, in terms of maximizing grass production, tightness of calving patterns, tightness of bulling patterns, and animals which drift out of that. Well, if you're a calf that's born and stay in June, and then you're selling calves in the autumn, because that's what you always do, that animal, that's the production from one animal's life in 12 months time, and you've sold it as a 4-month-old calf, whereas its colleagues or its peer group were born in March, and they're probably fetching £200 a head more than the other one is.
Yeah, and that sort of takes us back to what we were talking about before, about the importance of getting things right, particularly in this atmosphere where we're not sure where the single farm payment is going, and how the elms will affect us, and all those sort of changes, and probably the elephant in the room, Brexit, as well. So maybe we shouldn't go down that point at this time. But all these changes are going to make farm efficiency that much more important, aren't they?
Yeah, they're going to. It's going to have a higher impetus or higher importance on, just doing the basics right, and doing the basics really well.
Yeah.
And that's what it comes down to. Let's say the targets aren't difficult, but if you start to miss them, then the knock-on effect on that farm systems effect, and sometimes I say if the farm system's in a bit of a rut, it can be a hard one to break out of. And as you say, a lot of that can come back to, as you're alluding to, Edward, is around quality of grasslands on the farm, and stock performance from that feed, which then can impact body condition score, and that impacts fertility, and then that impacts age at sale, age at weaning, and weight at weaning, and it continues to go round. So sorting out the basics. So it starts with the soil test. Really good to hear that the majority of soil tests, the pH has been in a good place.
Yeah, it's coming back fairly.
Yeah, so that's really good news. So then it's the species of the sward, and it's the management of that grazing sward, or at least the grazing management of that sward, to get the best from it. And being strict with the herd in terms of not accepting animals that that don't meet some of those targets. Being prepared to be make a hard decision, but to know that will lead to future benefit.
Yeah. But I think as well, if you have got animals which are, they're a bit small at calving, or whatever the issue is, then give them the space to bring them on faster. Don't just push them in a group and that's the way it fits. Just give them that care and attention, a bit more care and attention, and they will catch up.
Yeah.
But if they're always going to be the smallest or the runt in the litter effectively, then give them a bit of space.
Do you think it's a good time to mention herbal days, perhaps?
Yes, sure, yeah.
Never heard of them.
So, I mean, obviously, part of our work with the PLP is the sort of promotion of soil health and water quality. And part of our remit is to give out small grants. And Edward has been working with me particularly, and James as well. And we have made a number of small grants to farmers to establish herbal lays where they perhaps haven't been able to use the mid-tier stewardship scheme. So if anybody's interested in talking to me about that, then please make contact with us. We've had a number of farmers who've established some herbal lays, and they seem to be very pleased with them at the moment. I mean, I'll go through, obviously the benefits, sort of increased pollinators, soil, increased soil carbon, which we were talking about earlier between ourselves. Perhaps also the ability to lessen the amount of fertilizer used and that type of thing. So I think if you're interested in contacting us, then I'd be pleased to chat a bit more with you about that on an individual basis.
I think it's a really good opportunity. The mid-tiered scheme and the GS4 option for herbal lay was a fantastic opportunity, but the ability for the PLP to support the establishment or seed costs for those herbal lays is fantastic. Long-term work from a big grazing trial site in Germany, where they compare 1 species, 4 species, 8 and 16 species lays. The species or the lays with more than 8 species or 8 species or more are producing more biomass per year than ryegrass plus 200 kilos of nitrogen. That's exciting for farmers, because when we talk about reducing inputs, we automatically assume it means reduce output, but increase the number of species in the sward, and you can maintain output or even increase output with less inputs. And that's a win-win for farmers, for income, for costs, environment.
And,
really positive.
Perhaps that's something that we're rediscovering, James. I think there's always the sort of ability of crops. I'm thinking particularly about dredge corn. Where you use 2 species together and get an increased yield. So perhaps that's with the wildlife hat on, to increase sort of the number of species in the lay is a good thing, not only from a biodiversity point of view, but also from an animal production point of view.
And particularly on the lighter soils where you may have struggled in some fields for grass growth. Grass either stopped growing or really slowed up this year in May, June. Then the herbal lay, there's always species there remaining productive, and then importantly for animal performance, there's always species that remain really palatable, high quality right through the season. We're finding with ryegrass and clover, then we're losing that quality, or especially with the ryegrass only swards, we really lose that quality post-June, where we reach the heading dates for all this grass species, ryegrass species. So definitely herbal lays, and probably the best way to get into it is to try it on an area of the farm. And obviously, with the PLP, they can mitigate or reduce the risk or the expense to try it. From a note from what we've seen, how we've used it the most effectively is to put a group of animals on the herbal lay and to maintain them on the lay, because there's a rumen adjustment that needs to happen. And so in terms of animal performance, it's better to have that dedicated to a class of stock, maybe a priority stock class, so maybe it's growing cattle, and for them to stay on that lay and for that lay to be grazed on a rotation. So if it's a 10-acre field, we want to split it into 6 or 8 paddocks and be moving those animals every 3 or 4 days.
That seems to be a reoccurring topic this afternoon, doesn't it? The importance of transition between different stages of feeding, whether that's dairy cows or beef or whatever class of stock that we're talking about, really.
Well, that's a slight technical issue. Edward's back. Just let you unmute yourself, Edward. There you go.
Yeah, I lost a bit of connection there.
Yeah.
All I was going to say about the herbal lays was that a couple of years ago, I went onto the Cotswolds and we were looking at some very dry land, and I'd worked in the Cotswolds before. It always used to say it would never grow unless you have a shower of rain every day. But there are 2 herbal lays there. The cows were contented, got plenty of grass. And then we looked at another field and exactly this, even a lay that had been planted probably 2 or 3 years old. Then again, the cows were contented, and you could see when you looked within their mouths, there wasn't just ryegrass, there was a complete range from clover to yarrow to whatever was in the lay. But the one thing that was clearly obvious was those cows were contented. They weren't looking to get out. And parts of the peninsula can be very dry, particularly that land right against the coast.
Yep.
The rain comes in and probably rains half a mile in, so these lays are very good at coping with dry weather.
Yeah. So adding a little bit of resilience to that farm system, so knowing that there will always be good quality feed on farm, and maybe not appropriate for the whole farm, but certainly as a tactical part of the farm grazing platform.
Yeah, definitely.
Very successful. Okay, so just a slight change of tack now. You've made some interesting observations. So we think about jobs we're doing in the winter, and obviously a lot of farmers will spend a lot of time in buildings, whether that's milking, whether that's feeding cattle, whether that's checking cattle bedding up. And so you were talking about the importance of lighting, Edward, and the value of investing in good lights.
Yeah, I've been involved with a couple of farms of late, one a chicken farm and one a dairy farm. And in both cases, they put in new LED lights. And the difference, certainly in the case of the chicken farm, and I know it's not quite the same as dairy cows, but the concept is the same, is that it didn't change the natural habit of the chicken, but what it did do was it reduced the level of seconds in the flock by 19%. We're currently running at 19%. And that by putting in new LED lights, which cost £350, had reduced that down to 2 to 3%. Now, I've seen that also applied in dairy herds where new lighting has gone in, and all the consumption of silage has gone up because they can actually see where they're going, almost to the point where the farmer actually had to introduce a timer, so that because they were eating so much silage, because they could actually see where they're going. And it's so depressing to walk into some of these old cubicle houses and there's one horrible light. And it's, animals, certainly cows, don't have the range of color and vision that we do. And they need to be able to see as well. And it's surprising the difference that you can make to those animals, being able to see where they can go, where they don't feel timid, because there isn't, particularly around areas like water troughs or access to feeding troughs. If they feel timid, they won't be. Then there will be the ones that don't get in calf. There'll be the ones that don't milk as well because they haven't got the access to feed. And it will be for yourself as well, just feeling that much better. Certainly the dairy farmer I spoke, he actually felt that much better, and he'd also put LED lights in his parlour. For the same reason, it made him feel better, that it was a lighter place to work, it wasn't dingy. So I would make a plea to anybody to look at what you can do, improve the level of lighting in your buildings, these new modern LED lights, and they do make a brighter light, and they also improve your well-being. They make you feel better. So go ahead, get it done.
Yeah. No, the little research I found just whilst you were talking, Ed, was a 1 to 2 litres per day cow improvement for extending the hours of daylight from 13 to 16. And particularly relevant to that was the use of LED lighting, because it says that brighter, clearer light, more akin to daylight. So there was a really good return on investment for the dairy herd, not to mention just that practical element of being able to see, observe stock more easily, and particularly in the parlour areas where you're handling animals, making that job just more pleasant. So we've got a few more months to go before we get back into longer days, and you spend a lot of time in your stock and a lot of time in the sheds. So it's just a nice investment to make.
Can I sort of add to that? Sort of winter subjects, particularly around sort of farmyard manure and slurry. Last year we ran a training event about the safe handling and use of farmyard manure and fertilizer. Now we have the potential to run that course again. I've spoken to the trainer, and we could do that while the COVID emergency is on, if anybody's interested in doing it over Zoom. So we could do it that way. Alternatively, we could wait until the spring, and hopefully when the restrictions are lifted, we could run it as a day course. So I'd like to encourage people to get in touch with me if they want to sort of take us up on the offer of training there. And that does cover lots of things from NVZs to the new rules for water and through various other handling regulations. So it's particularly aimed at tractor operators, but also farmers as well. So if you were interested in taking us up on training, then if you want to get hold of me or Edward, and Edward will pass you on with the contact details too for the PLP.
And is that that's an assessed course, Phil?
Yeah, well, yeah. So if we did deliver it over Zoom, it would be the training only, because we're not able to obviously do the examine part. But yeah, there is a level 2 certificate that goes with it to add to your Lantra card if you've got one.
Okay. Very good. Okay, excellent. So so things to think about for now going through to spring: body condition score and/or weigh stock. Compare that to the targets, and if anyone's listening and not sure what those targets are, either body condition score or maybe for weights of stock, breeding or growing animals, then welcome to get into contact with Edward or myself or with Phil. So really, really important, because that's what's driving your farm system. Think about opportunities in the spring. So there's an opportunity to borrow an aerator. We often think about, do the plants have enough water and do they have enough nitrogen? We very rarely think, do they have enough air? And it's the biology in the soil that's releasing all these minerals and nutrients for the plants that need air to operate. So the aerator potentially a really good tool when it's used in the right soil conditions.
Could I add to that and say that so I mean we're making a small charge for usage, which is 60 pound a day plus VAT, but we could get it delivered to your farm for you. And if you haven't got the facility to actually do the aeration yourself, then we've got access to a local young farmer who will do that for you. Obviously there will be a charge, but we can facilitate that for you if you want.
I'm impressed you're towing that behind your car, Phil, farm to farm.
Say that again, James?
I said I'm impressed you're towing that behind your car to get it from farm to farm.
Amazing what a Subaru can pull, James. Yeah,
very good. So yeah, so good conditions obviously, but make sure you inquire if you've got interest in using that, and I'd suggest you use it. It's going to be sometime April, May, June time, most effective, to get the benefit and the benefit in the season and also in the autumn, winter following. Soil testing as well. You're saying, Phil, that this season's nearly wrapped up, but you'll start getting in earnest.
Yep. And we can do some compaction testing for you as well. So I can come out and do sort of a compaction test using our penetrometer and give you a report on your soil conditions using that equipment, if you'd like.
Okay, that's really good. I guess we'll finish with a note that all of us are available to speak to. If anyone who's listening needs to, whether that's with questions or farming related issues or just someone to speak to. We're well aware that it's long short days and long nights, and and hopefully we'll get some respite from COVID restrictions over Christmas. But we've still got a little while to go before we're all back out and partying together. So everyone keep a lookout. Keep an eye on yourself and on friends and neighbours. And get in touch if they need to.
Can I take this opportunity to encourage, if you'd like to come along to the West Cornwall Grassland Society, we're running Zoom meetings during the winter because of the COVID emergency, and we've already had a couple of interesting speakers this autumn. So we're keen to keep the society going. So you get hold of me or Edward if you'd like to attend the next meeting, and I think James, you might be coming to the next meeting. Along with so I think our subject next time will be the no fence system.
Yeah.
So if anybody's interested in hearing more about the no fence system and the GPS collars that we're trying out, then please tune into us on the 14th of December at 7:30.
Yeah.
And
So-
if they want to join that, Phil, it's just a case of giving you an email or a call.
Yeah. Well, Phil is the chairman. I'm the secretary,
Yeah. So
and we've come to the conclusion that we can only run Zoom meetings throughout the winter. So we'll have a monthly meeting,
Yeah.
third Monday every month from October to March. We've had Steve Chapman from SC Nutrition, and we've had a local MP, Derek Thomas. And then obviously, as Phil says, we've got No Fence in December. Then we got ADHB in January. And then I think we're hoping for a farmer forum in February, which will be an interesting one to try and conduct over Zoom. And then there will be the speaker that we had intended to come to from Ireland last year will hopefully be our March meeting. And then perhaps come April, we can get out on farms and do some visit.
Yeah.
But what I have been impressed with is actually there's increasing number of farmers attending Zoom meetings. They're good. The internet connection is reasonable. In fact, numbers are not that different from if we had a live meeting. So keep it going.
Easier to get to, and you can have more than one drink.
You can. And the other thing, which is interesting, because it's always been difficult to get a speaker to come to West Cornwall for anything, because it's such a long way.
Yeah.
To actually have an international speaker, or potentially two international speakers, is brilliant, I think.
Really good.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Well, thanks, James. Thanks,
Cool.
Edward.
No, thanks,
Very
Phil.
much.
Thank you, Edward.
Thank you, Phil. Thanks, James.
We'll wish everyone a Merry Christmas.
Yes, everybody.
Yes.
Merry
Yes,
Christmas.
Along
And,
with that, Merry
Happy
Christmas
New
to
Year.
all.
and hopefully 2021 is better than 2020.